Thanks so much for being here as we continue our Fall Meet the Author series. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Erin Shea, and I'm the head of adult programming here at Darien Library. Programs at the library are made possible by contributions to our annual Friends of the Library campaign, so thank you for your continued support to make our programs and collections available to the community. Tonight, we welcome not one, but two very special guests. Dr. Brent Ridge is a physician and professor who has taught at Mount Sinai School of Medicine in Manhattan. Following that, he was vice president of Healthy Living at Martha Stewart Omnimedia. His medical expertise now comes into play in a very different way, whether it's delivering goats or nursing Farmer John back to health after hip surgery. His partner, Josh Kilmer-Purcell, is an advertising executive and former drag queen, which is a combination you don't hear often enough. In 2006, his memoir, I Am Not Myself These Days, became a New York Times bestseller. These two gentlemen gave up the glitz and glamour of living in New York City to purchase the Beekman Mansion in Sharon Springs, New York. From this 60-acre goat farm, they operate Beekman 1802, one of the fastest growing lifestyle brands in the United States. Their foray into farming is documented on the Planet Green TV show, The Fabulous Beekman Boys, which the New York Times called a gay Green Acres. They've built a worldwide reputation for their goat's milk soap and artisanal black cheese, which you can't get anywhere. I know, because I've personally tried. Brent and Josh are here to discuss the Beekman 1802 Heirloom Cookbook, which published last month by Sterling. It showcases recipes that have been handed down through generations, which include heirloom fruits and vegetables. Brent and Josh are two city guys who bought a farm. They've got a herd of goats, a llama, and a whole lot of drama. Farming ain't easy, but they make farming fabulous. Please join me in welcoming to Darien Library the Fabulous Beekman Boys.
That might be the best introduction we've ever had. So thank you. Is there anybody in here who has no idea who we are? All right. Oh, so we have to give our whole spiel.
You guys can go wander forward. We're going to talk about ourselves. So we're Josh and Brent, otherwise known as Fabulous Beekman Boys, and our story begins, as was said, when we were upstate, and we were one of those obnoxious Manhattan couples that drove upstate every autumn, and we brought out our best flannel plaids and rented a car and drove up, and we got lost in this little town of Sharon Springs, which, has anybody ever been to Sharon Springs? Sharon Springs, it's about an hour from Albany, due west, and near Cooperstown. So we drove into this town, and Sharon Springs used to be a spa town, so it has all these big old hotels, wooden hotels. It looks like Saratoga Springs, except empty. And so
We were immediately smitten with it.
it was this beautiful sort of faded luxury decay, and
Kind of like Grey Gardens. Has anyone seen Grey Gardens? Well, we love Grey Gardens, and so that was, when you go through the town, it's like that. Even characters like that.
yeah. And then we came around the corner and we saw all the lights on in this beautiful old hotel called the American Hotel, and it was in stark contrast to, there were no other lights on in the entire village practically, and so we stopped and went in, and I think the entire village was in the hotel. There's really not a lot else to do, and we had dinner there and spent the night, and we really fell in love with the people. It's so rare that you just walk in somewhere and you sit at the bar and everybody just comes in and starts talking to you, and we knew everybody in town by the next morning. We were sad to go.
Because everybody has a dual purpose in town.
Yes.
So the bartender at the hotel is also the town mortician. And the woman who serves brunch, the hostess for brunch on Sundays at the hotel, is also the real estate agent.
So the town feels twice as big.
And in fact, it was because before brunch on the Sunday, before we were going to drive back to the city, we were just driving around, and we drove by this beautiful farmhouse, which we thought was a museum because it was just so perfect. And as we kept on driving by it, we saw the for sale sign in the yard. And when we got back to the hotel to have breakfast, the guy said, "Oh, what were you doing this morning?" I'm like, "Oh, we were just driving around, looking at the sights, and this was this beautiful house." I'm like, "Oh, that's the Beekman. Everybody knows that house up here. It's been on the market for 5 years." And, the real estate agent who shows that house serves the brunch here. They said, and already you could see them thinking, "We're going to get them up here." And so they called her and they said, "Come in a few minutes early and take them through the house." And she did.
So she came in, her name was Michelle. Suddenly she was weighing real estate commission against brunch tips. And she went with the commission. And we instantly fell in love with it. And this was 2007, so the price was a little inflated.
On the way home, we decided we were going to buy it.
We were going to do it.
And so, we kind of went through all of our finances, actually cashed in everything that we had.
Well, not everything.
Almost everything. And said, "Okay, here's what we can afford to buy, plus a huge mortgage, a jumbo mortgage." And
because it was 2007, and $1 million goat farm really seemed like a good investment. Actually, it was an empty farm.
And right, it wasn't even a goat farm.
Yeah.
Goats.
Yes.
So
I mean, it could only go up in value, right?
And we really did think it was going to be a weekend place and then a place that we would ultimately retire to. But about 2 weeks after we closed on the property, we got a handwritten note in our mailbox. And it said, "My name is John Hall, and I grew up in the area on a dairy farm, and now I have a herd of 60 goats, 80 goats, and I'm losing my farm, and I bring them to your property." Because in a small town like this, word spreads very fast, And then at the end, he's like, "I'm gay," as if that was going to seal the deal. And so, Josh met with him. He thought he was very sincere. If you've seen him on the show, you know he's very
We went and
sincere.
saw the goats because you wanted to know if they smelled.
Right.
So
See, at that time I'm working with Martha, so I have very inflated expectations of what a farm should look like.
So we went and visited the goats, and it was very sad. You can't say no to homeless goats.
Or almost Farmer John.
Yes. So without him knowing, he was in the city, and I told him they could move in, so he brought the goats.
And it seemed like a good idea because we're like, okay, we're only there on the weekends. You can watch after the place when we're not there. Seemed like a match made in heaven.
So then we were really the obnoxious New Yorkers, where we had a weekend place and we had help. And then, like everybody else, it was 2008, and we both lost our jobs within a month of each other.
And it really was an oh crap moment because we were, we had cash in our savings. We didn't really have anything to fall back on. And it was one of those situations where, life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. Well, life gives you goat milk, what are you going to make out of it? And so we started investigating, can we make yogurt? Can we make cheese? What can we do? And, there's a lot of regulations and red tape to be a certified dairy where you can produce consumables. And so, researching the internet, we learned a lot about farming from Google. And we saw, oh, goat milk soap is good for the skin. I bet we can make goat milk soap. And that was the first thing that we started making.
So we were going to pay our jumbo mortgage with soap. That made a lot of sense. And that was a tough winter. So we lost our jobs in September, and we shut down the house after New Year's Eve that year, and we didn't know if we were going to open it back up. But we had started making the soap, and by coincidence had given a bar to Martha for Christmas. Even though she laid
I still believe it wasn't her decision.
And so she loved the soap. We also had a New York Times reporter who had heard our story and came up and did an article on us. And so we shut down on New Year's Eve. We didn't know if we were coming back. And then Martha said, will you come on the show and make your soap and sell it? And the New York Times article came out at just about the same time. And so then we had our business. And we started. And what happened was we realized that we weren't going to do it ourselves. We weren't going to make it ourselves. So Insurance Springs certainly didn't have a record of success. And we realized that everybody was going to have to work together to try to make something out of this town. And that's when we started going to our neighbors we knew we weren't going to pay the mortgage with soap, but we said, can we start a brand? We know how to brand. I'm in advertising, he's with Martha, so maybe we can start a brand and have people in town help us. And we met our neighbors, one of whom was a weaver, a historic weaver, and we said, can you show us your stuff? And she taught us how to weave. We liked her things. And she said, oh, if you like this, you got to go see the blacksmith. So then we went over to Michael McCarthy, the blacksmith, and we went through his stuff, and he was like, this is great, this would sell for $100 down the city. And then he would be like, well, you need to go see the candy maker, you need to go see the baker. So everything started coming together, and we helped people sort of design their products for what we knew people in Connecticut would buy. And that's really how the business started taking off. And the other thing we knew we had to do is we had to make Sharon Springs a real place in people's imagination. And so one of the first things we did was we said, we have to have a harvest festival, or we have to have a festival. And everybody in town looked at us, come on, there's 500 of us, there's 600, within 20 miles of here.
Because even though on the show it seems like everyone's working together, that's not.
Yeah, it's a small town.
Yeah.
So there were naysayers, but that first year we had our festival.
We pretty much did the whole festival ourselves the first year because we had to demonstrate that you could put together a festival. Yeah.
And there was about 500 people that came that first year.
We thought it was amazing because there were 500 people in town. So.
And that coincidentally, that was when we were filming the pilot episode for the show. And the reason we got the show was because the president of Planet Green signed up for our newsletter, and she read our newsletter, and she liked our story. So they had sent this crew up there to film the pilot to the show. We didn't really know it was going to be a show. And they filmed the show, and that when that aired the next spring, by the time the festival came around the next year, we had 5,000 people that came to town. 500 to 5,000. This year, the crowd estimates were 7,000 to 8,000. And Sharon Springs really has become this place in people's imagination that I think people would really like America to sort of be, where everybody is working together. It's not red versus blue, it's not city versus country. It really now is everybody working together. And I think it's the most amazing place. Oh, I just want to tell us, so when we had the 5,000 people come to the Harvest Festival, that was totally a surprise, from 500 to 5,000. And we ran out of food, because we have 1.5 restaurants and a gas station. And so we literally ran out of food. And here these people had driven from over 18 states that first year. And they just drove to Sharon Springs. They had no idea what they were coming into. And then there was no food. So people started grumbling. We didn't know what to do. And then in the afternoon, I saw people walking around with hamburgers and hot dogs. And I asked them, one of them, I said, where did that come from? And it turns out somebody that lived in the village had driven 40 miles to the nearest grocery store, bought all the hamburger, all the hot dogs, all the buns, brought them back, started grilling in the front yard and handing them out because they didn't want people to go home, being hungry from Sharon Springs.
And that's really one of those kind of turning points in the psyche of the village, because, that first year of the festival, we're like, oh, you can't do it, you have to do it by yourself.
It's very
and
well
the
with
second
me.
year, we had a lot, people who helped, but no one really anticipated 5,000 people. So, I think when all those 5,000 people came, then they're like, oh wow, maybe they were right, maybe we can do this. And then they're like, what can we do to get these people back, again?
So now we've actually had to freelance a town curmudgeon from the next town
more
over.
curmudgeons.
Yeah, it's very hard. So that's kind of our story. One of the things that, you're here tonight because we have a cookbook that just came out. And that grew as a result of our website, where we had a contest on the website for people to enter their family's heirloom recipes that they loved in their family. And it had a tremendous response. It really, we didn't expect that big of a response. And people had to submit the recipe and the story behind it. And we said it would be judged both on the recipe and the story. So we got so many wonderful responses from that we decided that we would share our family recipes. And so in this cookbook are they're both Brent's family and my family, our recipes, but we've sort of done our twist as, our farm twist on them. We took out the cream of mushroom soup. from all of them in the oleo, and made them a little fancier.
Yeah, well, we'll talk a little bit about the book, and then we'll do a Q&A, so you can answer whatever questions you want to. But I know Sterling really wants us to talk about it. Right, Sterling? But yeah, I mean, as Josh said, we started out with recipes that had kind of come down through our families that had evolved over time from our farm. There are times, and I'm sure you're like this too, you're really craving macaroni and cheese, and you happen to have something that you have to use up, and that's what happens with us, because the growing season in our farm is really short. So when we have stuff, we're trying to eat it, like, what are we going to do with zucchini, and so like the macaroni and cheese recipe that made it into the book is a macaroni and cheese that happens to have kale and mushroom in it, because we were harvesting a record amount of kale that year.
Not a lot of things to do with kale.
But it was
delicious.
But it was the macaroni and cheese recipe that started with Josh's mom, and so we decided to call it the Heirloom Cookbook, and we tried to think about what makes an heirloom. And people who are familiar with the type of products that we design and produce, we always try to create something that either has multiple purposes or has added value in some way. And so the idea was the same with this book. And so first we sat down and said, okay, well, what makes an heirloom recipe? So what makes a recipe be cooked enough and shared around your table enough that it has a story or its own mythology around it? And so we're like, well, it has to be delicious, of course, and it has to have ingredients that you can find. Not some crazy wonderful recipe. And it has to be pretty simple to make with techniques that you know whatnot. And so all of the recipes in the book really have to meet all three of those criteria. Because we all have cookbooks. I mean, we're guilty of this. We have probably 4 shelves of cookbooks at our house, and probably 60% we've never cooked a single recipe out of. And to us, that is not a book that has value. We wanted to create a book that you were really going to go and use over and over again. And then we're like, okay, well, what more can we do? What more is heirloom? And we're like, well, these are our heirloom recipes, but we don't want it just to be our book. We want it to become the user's book. And so if people have seen a copy, what we did is we put these these pockets inside that have these blank recipe cards. And you can come to our website and download as many blank recipe cards as you want. I think there are 10 in the book. But the idea is that you're going to write your family's own heirloom recipes in here, because we all have them like folded up and stuck in different places. And so it'll really be a scrapbook for your family's own recipe. Particularly if you're going to give it as a gift, you're giving it to your daughter, so you're going to write your family's recipes in here and give that to her. So that again, it's going to be that book that you pull off your shelf over and over again. And
so, if anybody knows Brent from the show, they know that he's a little bit of a perfectionist, and maybe sometimes hard to work with.
Never.
So I just want everyone to know that this is the most beautiful cookbook you will ever buy, because Brent has slaved over everything. There's actually 3 covers, because
well, no, let me tell the story about the cover.
Okay. You defend yourself.
So, because of the TV show, and so many celebrity cookbooks come out, they wanted to put our pictures on the cover, because they're like, oh, you're on TV, that's going to sell the book. And I'm like, we definitely don't want our pictures on the cover. And so the compromise was to put a picture of the house on the cover, because that's kind of like the third character of the show. Well, and then of course they snuck this little band in at the end that has a picture on it.
Exactly.
But
so we have an embossed cover.
But look how beautiful the cover is.
3 covers.
Look how pretty. And this texture is supposed to look like the cheesecloth on the cheese.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of details.
And then custom pockets and vellum. Oh, and then we had to hire a fine art photographer, not a cookbook photographer.
Well, no, again,
So
because that was the
basically-
whole idea about heirloom. We didn't want it to be a book that 5 years from now was going to look really dated, with the photography looks dated. So we met this fine art photographer. Her name is Paulette Tavermina, and you can look her up at her website. She's amazing. She has this series of photography called Natura Morta, and she's never shot a cookbook before. But her style of photography is she'll take vegetables and fruits that are in states of decay and taxidermy insects
Or just
and
sort of natural
styles
state.
them